Thank you very much, Kathy, for the invitation. In this lecture, I would like to briefly give you an overview of the situation in terms of land cover reconstructions in the past and their use in modeling and understanding the land cover climate feedbacks. I'll start with the background on the why land cover climate relationships in the past and how we can study this. What we're interested in this lecture is the terrestrial vegetation as an active component of the climate system and the human part in this terrestrial vegetation and its possible effects on the albedo, for instance, carbon and water cycles. You all know that the terrestrial ecosystem, including the fire, has very many biogeochemical and geophysical effects on the climate. You know also that climate modeling, both global and regional climate models, are very complex and include a lot of different sub-models, if you want, and a lot of different modules. This is an example of the Max Planck Institute in Hamburg, GS-BA module, with a very complex dynamic land biosphere module that include a lot of models, including dynamic land cover and anthropogenic land cover change. So we know that the incorporation of land surface components to account for feedbacks and refine global change projections is a current priority in the climate modeling community. The land surface components are, of course, potential vegetation, but they are also land use, that is human-induced vegetation, and fire. Therefore, we need especially explicit descriptions of vegetation land cover in the past to apply the data model comparison approach in a good way, to test and improve dynamic vegetation models and climate models, coupled with dynamic vegetation models, and to test hypotheses on past land cover climate feedbacks. There are a lot of examples in the literature of experiments with climate models. This is already an old one from Brufkin and collaborators, showing biogeophysical cooling due to historical deforestation using a very simple reconstruction of past land cover based on simple population models. There are various approaches to spatially explicit reconstructions of past land cover. There has been much effort on reconstructing past global to subcontinental vegetation cover inferred from pollen, especially reconstruction of tree cover, not including the open land, and leaf area index. For instance, the works by Williams, Tarasov, Brewer, and Davis, based mainly on modern analog approach. You see here that the reconstructions published in Williams and collaborators, 2007, of the leaf area indexed when compared with the observed leaf area index is pretty good, but there is still quite a lot of noise. This is seen also in this map, the colored map, where you see the difference between reconstructed from pollen and the observed LARI, where you see that there are still too low values in red and too high values in blue. Tarasov and collaborators have also developed methods that are based on the modern analog approach too, that are giving really quite good reconstructions too, of, as you see here as an example, of needle-leaved tree cover, deciduous tree cover, and evergreen tree cover. Nevertheless, you see on the right side that there are discrepancies, again, in the pollen-based reconstructions with too high or too low values compared to the actual forest cover. We have heard several times this morning that people have used the HYDE dataset to make experiments in modeling. In the HYDE dataset, you have the open land cover, human-induced cover, is represented by agricultural land and partly by C3 grasses. If we are looking at Europe, you see that in the 1990 map, there is agricultural land only in the southwest and southeastern part of Europe, which is a bit odd if you think about it. And this is going back, of course, following back in the reconstructions, for instance, here at 1800, where you have very little agricultural land in Europe, which is not correct, of course, as we all know that the 1800 is the period of most open land cover in Europe, much more open than today even. There are now efforts to develop other methods to reconstruct historical land cover, for instance, by the group in the Max Planck Institute of Hamburg, Pongratz and collaborators, using crop pasture fractional maps between 1700 and 1992, and national population data set from so early as 800 AD to 2700 AD, combining this with potential vegetation map to finally give fractional maps of 14 vegetation types from 1800 to 1992. There is also the very nice work by Kaplan and collaborators. I give you the advice to look at the poster for more detail by Kaplan and collaborator. Session J on Saturday afternoon. It is based on climate data and soil data to produce a model of land suitability to cultivation and pasture, and also on population estimates for each population region from 1000 BC to 1850. It also takes into account technology and produces historical forest cover maps for Europe, two versions, one where technology is not taken into account and one in which it is taken into account. These are the two maps of the land suitability for cultivation and for suitability to pasture. This is the result for 1800, sorry. On the left, it is with the technology taken into account. In the middle, it's standard without technology. And on the right, you see as a comparison the HYDE map for the same period. So you see the big difference. This is the full series of maps in the two versions. Past land cover inferred from pollen records, as you have understood, there are some problems. What are the problems? They have been figured out since very long already. FAIRE put them forward, and one important problem is the question of how large an area an average pollen diagram represents. And in other words, what is the pollen representation of vegetation? There are a lot of factors involved in this, and new tools were developed by Shinya Sugita within the Nordvorsk Pollencal network, in which these factors are taken into account. It is called the Landscape Reconstruction Algorithm. It's published in the Holocene, 2007. And it includes two models, of which I will talk only of the reveals models that allows to reconstruct from pollen counts regional vegetation composition. It is best applied on large sites, but it can also be applied on multiple small sites. To apply this model, we need estimates of pollen productivity. We have estimates of pollen productivity in Europe for the northwestern part and the western part north of the Alps. There is work in progress in France, Spain, and Italy for the southern part. In the world, there are PPAs available for Northern America and Southern Africa, and there is work in progress for Africa, China, and India. Reveals has been tested in southern Sweden, Switzerland, Denmark. It's in progress for Norway and Finland. This is just an example from the results in Sweden, where you see how pollen percentages are underrepresenting the open land, showed by the colors yellow and orange here. And also in this case, how Picea and Pinus have inverse representation in pollen percentages compared to the observed vegetation. When you are using the reveals model, these biases are corrected, as you can see here. There have been other attempts to reconstruct the regional vegetation in southern Sweden earlier by the group of Richard Bradshaw and collaborators that have been very useful at the time. But we can see now that the reveals performance is much better. In this case, you see for birch, beech, spruce, and pine that the percentages are quite correct compared to the actual vegetation, while the earlier reconstruction shows either underrepresentation or overrepresentation or even inverse representations. And this is the case in the different regions we have looked into. There is now a new initiative in Europe called Landklim. It's a research project and a network that are supported by the Swedish Research Science Council and by Nordic Research Council, Nordforsk. In the Landklim network, the aim is to get a better collaboration between the paleovegetation people and the vegetation climate modelers in Europe. And in the research project, we are using the reveals model to reconstruct regional vegetation that will be used to test and modify dynamic vegetation model, the Lund Postam Jena GESS vegetation model, and also to look into the RCA3 regional climate model using a data model comparison approach. We are, of course, working in the region for which we have pollen productivity estimates. And the first step will be to produce maps on 2 time windows, 200 BP and 6000 BP. These are 2 periods of contrasting open land cover, very low at 6000 and highest at 200 BP. We will also do such complete reconstruction on the entire Holocene for selected sites distributed in the study region. So we have already several of them looking in the same way as this diagram, showing on the left the pollen proportions and on the right the revealed spaced vegetation proportions for the major tree and herbs pollen. So for the entire Holocene, we will produce this type of maps for Northwestern Europe and Western Europe north of the Alps, trajectories for the whole Holocene in that way, 4 time windows, pies of different vegetation groups, and of course, which is not done yet, gridded maps, and possibly integration with other maps based on other methods. So 2 CAM maps in fraction of grid cell 50 by 50 kilometer of major Texan groups of Texa for the 2 time windows, 200 and 6,000 BP. We also want to map additional time windows, of course, in the near future and integrate with other methods. I just want to add a few words on fire history in Europe, as fire is an important part of this land cover story. As you have heard in an earlier presentation, there are several fire initiatives that are linked to IGBP and PAGES. There are a lot of ongoing efforts to better integrate fire in climate modeling. There are in Europe new projects that are focused on this subject. And in Europe, there are in fact few continuous fire records for the entire Holocene, Southern Alps and Southern Sweden. They are located mainly in the Southern Alps and in Southern Sweden. This is an example from Southern Sweden with a record of macroscopic charcoal rates. They are compared with microscopic charcoal, even insect records, insects, beetles that are dependent on fire, and identify charred plant macrofossil. We have compared with regional climate data and the global charcoal database for Europe, and we can show that there are the trends we see in southern Sweden are very similar to the trends given by the global charcoal database for Europe, with changes in the activity of fire that are mainly dependent on changes in climate between dry and warm and cold and wet during the beginning of the Holocene, the early Holocene, the middle Holocene, while the late Holocene is mainly human induced. My conclusions are as follow. We need synthesis of Holocene land cover changes and better land cover reconstructions to improve climate models and predictions and to test hypotheses on land cover climate feedbacks. The REVEALS model is one avenue among others. It effectively estimates regional vegetation in open and semi-open landscapes and can be used for many regions of the world. But PPEs need to be estimated in many parts of the world if REVEALS is to be applied. Other approaches need to be applied for fast-track land cover synthesis over the globe. The best possible avenue is probably biomization, including human-induced biomes. There is a combined REVEALS biomization approach that is under development by Sugita again. The REVEALS reconstruction can be combined with land cover reconstructions based on other approaches, and I think we need more continuous high-resolution Holocene fire records from several parts of the world. Thank you very much for your attention.